Imagine walking through a city where diamonds are traded in open markets, not locked behind glass cases, not protected by vault doors, just laid out on cloth tables in the street, waiting for buyers. Travelers from Europe once wrote about cities like this with disbelief. They described markets overflowing with gold, spices, jewels, and silk, places so wealthy that even the richest modern cities would struggle to match their concentration of economic power. Today, when we think about wealth, we imagine places like New York, London, or Dubai, cities defined by skyscrapers, financial markets, and global trade. But long before modern banking and stock exchanges existed, there were cities whose economies dominated entire continents. Cities built on trade routes that connected the known world. Cities where a single market street could handle wealth equivalent to billions of dollars today. Yet many of these extraordinary places shared a strange fate. They became unbelievably rich, and then vanished almost overnight. Today we're exploring 3 ancient cities that may have been richer than modern New York. And one of them, according to travelers who visited it, might have been the wealthiest city the world had ever seen. Our first city sat at one of the most important locations on Earth, where Europe meets Asia, where the Mediterranean Sea connects to the Black Sea. This city was Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople controlled the economic crossroads of the ancient world. Caravans traveling along the Silk Road often ended their journeys here. Ships arriving from Africa and the Middle East unloaded goods into its massive harbors. Merchants from every corner of the known world gathered in its markets. And the Byzantines understood something powerful. If you control the gateway between continents, you control the wealth that flows through it. By the 10th century, Constantinople had become the largest city in Europe, with a population estimated at around 500,000 people. That might not sound extraordinary today, but at a time when most European cities had fewer than 50,000 inhabitants, Constantinople was enormous, and the wealth flowing through its markets was staggering. Silk from China arrived through long caravan routes across Asia. Spices from India were transported through Middle Eastern trade networks. Furs and amber came from Northern Europe and Russia. Gold arrived from Africa. Nearly every major trade route eventually passed through Constantinople, and the Byzantine government collected taxes and tariffs on much of that commerce. The city's port facilities were constantly filled with merchant ships. Warehouses stored exotic goods from distant lands. Markets bustled with traders speaking dozens of languages. Constantinople wasn't simply rich, it was the economic bridge between continents. But wealth has always had a dangerous side effect. It attracts attention. In the year 1204, something extraordinary happened. A Christian army from Western Europe, the Fourth Crusade, arrived outside Constantinople. They were originally supposed to march toward the Middle East. Instead, they turned their attention to the richest city they had ever seen. What followed was one of the greatest acts of looting in medieval history. Churches were stripped of gold, palaces were ransacked, treasures accumulated over centuries disappeared in a matter of days. Constantinople survived the attack, but its economic dominance was never fully restored. The gateway of the ancient world had been broken. Now imagine a city so powerful that it controlled nearly a third of the world's economic output. A city where goods from 3 continents arrived every day, and where enormous construction projects reshaped the landscape for centuries. That city was ancient Rome. At its peak in the 2nd century AD, Rome was the capital of the largest empire the world had ever seen. Its influence stretched from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, and from Spain in the west to the Middle East in the east. The Roman Empire controlled an immense network of roads, ports, and trade routes, and almost every one of them led to Rome. Grain shipments arrived from Egypt to feed the city's population. Olive oil was transported from Spain. Wine traveled from the vineyards of Gaul. Luxury goods, silk, spices, gemstones, arrived from Asia through long-distance trade networks. The Mediterranean Sea effectively became Rome's economic highway, but the wealth of Rome was not just visible in its markets. It was carved into the city itself. Take the Colosseum, for example. This massive amphitheater could hold around 50,000 spectators. Constructing it required enormous quantities of stone, iron, and skilled labor. In modern economic terms, historians estimate that projects of this scale would cost billions of dollars today. And the Colosseum was only one of many massive structures. Rome built aqueducts that carried water for kilometers into the city, public baths that could serve thousands of people at once, road networks that eventually stretched over 400,000 kilometers across the empire. By around the year 108 AD, Rome became the first city in human history to reach roughly 1 million inhabitants. For comparison, most cities at the time had populations between 10 and 50,000. Rome was a megacity nearly 2,000 years before modern megacities existed, supplying that many people required one of the most advanced logistical systems of the ancient world. Every day, fleets of ships delivered food, materials, and trade goods. The economy of Rome was not simply large, it was industrial in scale for its time. Yet even the greatest economic centers eventually faced decline. As the Roman Empire weakened during the 3rd and 4th centuries and trade routes became unstable, political instability increased, and the enormous urban population that Rome once supported began to shrink. By the early Middle Ages, the population of Rome had fallen dramatically. The city that once ruled the world had faded into a shadow of its former power. Now we come to a city that shocked the travelers who visited it. Portuguese explorers in the 16th century wrote descriptions that almost sound unbelievable. They said its markets were filled with gold and jewels. They claimed precious stones were sold openly in the streets, and they insisted that the city was larger and richer than many European capitals. This city was Vijayanagara, the capital of a powerful South Indian empire. Today, its ruins are known as Hampi. During the 15th and 16th centuries, Vijayanagara became one of the richest cities in the world. Its location placed it at the center of major trade routes linking the Indian Ocean with the interior of the subcontinent. Arab merchants brought prized war horses. Chinese traders carried silk and ceramics. Indian craftsmen produced textiles, metalwork, and gemstones that were traded across the region. The city's market stretched for kilometers. One of the most famous streets, the Hampi Bazaar, was lined with traders selling gold, pearls, and precious stones. Foreign visitors were astonished by the wealth they saw. One Portuguese traveler described the city as so large and prosperous that it rivaled the greatest capitals of Europe. The temples and architecture of Vijayanagara also revealed extraordinary economic power. Structures like the Virupaksha temple complex required enormous resources and skilled labor to build. These were not simple religious buildings. They were monumental statements of wealth and influence. At its height, Vijayanagara may have had hundreds of thousands of residents and controlled one of the most powerful regional economies in the world. But like many wealthy cities in history, Vijayanagara eventually became a target. In 1565, a coalition of rival kingdoms defeated the empire's army at the Battle of Talikota. What followed was devastating. Invading forces entered the city and began looting. Palaces were burned, markets were destroyed, and the city that once dazzled travelers with its wealth was abandoned. Today, the ruins of Hampi stretch across the landscape as silent reminders of a lost economic giant. History shows us something fascinating. Some of the richest cities ever built did not slowly decline over centuries. They collapsed suddenly. Constantinople, Rome, Vijayanagara, each one controlled enormous trade networks. Each one accumulated extraordinary wealth, and each one eventually became vulnerable because of that wealth. The lesson is simple. Economic power can build magnificent cities, but it can also turn those cities into targets. And sometimes the richest places in the world disappear faster than anyone expects.